In his book, The 1980s Countdown to Armageddon, Hal Lindsey wrote, "We are the generation which will see the end of the present world and the return of Jesus Christ." Lindsey believed that the signs Jesus gave in Mark chapter 13 and the parallel text in Matthew and Luke predicted when Jesus would come again. Lindsey made his prediction over 40 years ago. That generation has passed, and Jesus has not returned. It seems that Lindsey was mistaken. Last Sunday, we looked at the first part of Mark chapter 13. As they leave the temple, Jesus' disciples are overawed by the grandeur of the temple and of the buildings that surround it. Jesus replied, "Do you see all these great buildings? Not one stone will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." Well, that got the attention of the disciples. And when they were alone up on the Mount of Olivet, no doubt able to see the great temple complex as well as the city, they asked Jesus about his statement. In Mark's account, the disciples asked Jesus two questions. "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they are about to be fulfilled?" In Matthew's account, three questions are asked. When will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? The disciples apparently thought, if you're saying that this temple and this city are going to be destroyed, that would certainly indicate that you were coming back. This would certainly indicate the end of everything. Well, last Sunday I made the case that in Mark chapter 13, Jesus offered signs indicating when Jerusalem and the temple would be destroyed. They could look at certain things happening and realize that the destruction was about to begin. Jesus says, now there are going to be some things you think are signs. Those aren't signs that this is about to happen. But he basically says, when you see the abomination of desolation, and in Luke's account, when you see the armies surrounding Jerusalem, you know that it's time to take action. There are signs of when Jerusalem will be destroyed. Signs that can be observed, actions that can be taken. And we also note that in verse 30 of Mark 13, Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened." The event for which Jesus gave signs would happen within a generation. And about 40 years later, the Roman army attacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. While Lindsey and some others apply all or almost all of Mark 13 to Jesus' second coming, my understanding is that Mark chapter 13, verses 1 through 31, applies to the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. But Jesus does address his coming. Mark does not include the disciples' question about Jesus' second coming, but he does give Jesus' answer about his coming. And that is our text today, Mark chapter 13, verses 32 through 37. "No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard, be alert. You do not know when that time will come. It's like a man going away. He leaves his house and puts his servants in charge, each with his assigned task, and tells the one at the door to keep watch. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or at midnight, or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch." In our text, we see first a statement about Christ's second coming. At verse 32, Jesus shifts the subject to his second coming. What he said previous to this, I believe, applies to the fall of Jerusalem. But here he says, no one knows about that day or hour. The angels don't know. And Jesus says, even the Son doesn't know. Even I don't know when that day will happen. Only the Father knows. Now, several English translations begin Jesus' statement with the word but. And that's a good translation. The word but suggests a contrast. Jesus has been talking about one thing, and now he changes to a different subject. We also note that when Jesus spoke of the destruction of Jerusalem, he said days. The destruction of Jerusalem would take more than one day. When he speaks about his second coming, Jesus says, but about that day or hour. When Jesus comes again, it's going to be a sudden thing. It's going to happen in just a brief period of time. So we have days versus day. Jesus gives signs about the fall of Jerusalem, but he indicates there will be no signs of the time of his second coming. Donald Jewell said, if Jesus is uncertain of God's timing, there is good reason to be suspicious of other forecasters boasting knowledge of matters reserved for God alone. There are those who say, we know when Jesus is coming again. The signs are there. Jesus disagrees with what they say. He said, I don't know when it's going to be. We also have a warning about Christ's second coming. This is statements in verses 33, 35, and 37. Be on your guard. Be alert. You do not know when that time will come. Keep watch. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. Jesus says, here's what you need to do in regard to when I'm going to come again. You always need to be alert. You always need to be watchful. In other words, you need to be ready. David Garland said, when the Son of Man comes, he will not quiz people to see whose predictions on the date were accurate. He will want to know what we were doing. Jesus says, watch. That carries with it the idea of always being ready for his return, being prepared. You know, the preachers who claim to know when Jesus will return often don't call upon their hearers to watch the way they live. They just call upon their hearers to send more money to receive more prophecies. We prepare ourselves for Christ's coming by being constantly prepared. Alan Coe, commenting on this text, said, in the midst of many details that are puzzling, two main principles are clear. First, the Christian is to avoid unhealthy interest as to the actual date. And secondly, he is to see his very uncertainty as to the date as a strong stimulant to ceaseless watchfulness. In other words, like every other Christian doctrine, that of the second coming has a moral goal. It is designed to promote action more than contemplation. And that action is to be a growth in holiness. While the early Christians saw signs that indicated when Jerusalem would fall, and while they were able to take action at the last moment and escape the city, and many of them did and avoided death, on the other hand, the only way to be ready for the second coming is to be living as if today was the last day you had. Now, we often reflect on that. When are we going to die? Anyone here know when you're going to die? Well, no, you don't. Someone said, you need to live as if this were the last day you would be alive. And it might be. We also need to live as if this might be the day that Jesus comes again, because we don't know when that day will be. Our understanding, our proper understanding of the second coming of Jesus says we need to be watchful. We need to be preparing every day. Jesus also includes an illustration about Christ's second coming, verses 33 through 36. In Matthew's gospel, there is actually more than just this brief parable. But here we have what we would call the parable of the doorkeeper. There's the master, the owner of the land. He goes away, and he leaves his house and puts his servants in charge. Each one of them has an assigned task. And there's the one at the door, the doorkeeper. He especially needs to keep watch. He needs to keep certain people out of there. He needs to protect the property. The servants don't know when the owner's going to return. Now, I understand, and I've witnessed, there is a thing on these smartphones where you can pick certain people that are your contacts, and that smartphone will tell you where they are geographically at any moment. Debbie will say, well, my dad's in Arlington, so he must be at church. And later on, it will say he's in Mansfield. Well, he's apparently gotten home. And then sometimes he turns off his phone and she doesn't know where he is. Well, unless you have a device like that, and they didn't in the first century, they didn't even have a telephone, any way of communication. All these servants knew is the owner's gone, and at some point he's coming back. And when he gets back, we need to be ready. There's none of this business of cleaning the house at the last moment. You got to have it ready now. Everything that should be done needs to be done on time, all the time, because we don't know when the owner's coming back. He could come back in the evening or at midnight, when the rooster crows at the dawn. We don't know when it will be. Jesus says, keep watch, because you don't know when it's going to happen. And then he says, if he comes suddenly, don't let him find you sleeping. Don't be asleep at your post. There will be no time for second preparations when Jesus comes again. When I worked at the Sonic Drive-In long ago, I learned the slogan, prepare for the rush. Now, every day we expected to be busy at lunch and at supper or dinner. But occasionally, in the evening when I was there at work, there would be one or maybe even two school buses that would pull in to the Sonic. And the manager would say to one of his key employees that could take orders fast, get out there, don't let those kids get off the bus. Get on the bus and take their orders. You didn't want a bunch of kids going around and going to different speakers and ordering. And what those of us who were inside doing the cooking did at that moment, well, at that moment we put together the onion rings and cut the French. No, that was already done. We were prepared for the rush, and all we had to do was fill up the grill with hamburger patties and drop those fries in the deep fryer. And when those orders came in, we were ready to fill them. We were prepared for the rush. There was no advance warning that the school bus was coming. We were prepared. Think for a moment. Now, just what would we do if we knew the exact time of Jesus' return? Would we be living each day in anticipation of his coming? Or would we be living any old way, knowing, well, if he's coming on the 1st, I can get ready the day before. But we don't know when it's coming. Christians must avoid two extremes. One extreme is to be obsessed with when and look for signs that aren't there. Really, the only sign of when Jesus is going to come again is no sign. It is going to take folks by surprise. The other extreme is to believe that Jesus has not returned in almost 2,000 years, Why should he come now? Why watch? Most of us do not really expect Jesus to return in our lifetime. He hadn't done it yet. Most of us really expect that we're going to die one of these days. And that, when Jesus comes, we will be raised. But it could be that we are among those who will see Jesus return. David Garland, again, has these words. Christians can be assured of two things: that the coming of the Lord is certain, and that it will occur someday. Looking for premonitory signs can only agitate Christians, sidetrack them from the important business at hand, or become simply a cerebral amusement.